Why is it that those who are called to a higher purpose often face the deepest battles with lust? It's a struggle no one likes to talk about. Yet, it's far more common than most people realize. And the reasons behind it, they're not just surprising, they're spiritually profound. If you're feeling overwhelmed by this silent battle, understand this: you are not alone. In fact, there's a deep biblical explanation that can help unravel the mystery. Today, we're going to uncover the truth behind this hidden struggle. Throughout the Bible, some of the most anointed and purpose-driven individuals have faced fierce temptations. Consider King David, known as a man after God's own heart. Yet he fell into the trap of lust with Bathsheba. Or look at Samson, a man gifted with supernatural strength, whose destiny was overshadowed by his weakness for Delilah. Even today, those chosen by God are not exempt from this struggle. But why? Why does lust seem to specifically target those who are set apart for greatness? This isn't just about human weakness. It's not merely a lapse in discipline or a moral failing. It's something far more profound. Lust is part of a spiritual battle, strategically designed by the enemy. The enemy knows exactly who to target. The Bible itself confirms that spiritual warfare is real and relentless. In Ephesians 6:12, it says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places." Lust, therefore, isn't merely a physical temptation. It's a calculated spiritual attack. It aims directly at those with a divine calling. Why? Because the enemy knows that if he can corrupt the purity of a chosen one, he can hinder God's purpose for their life. But why does this struggle hit so hard? Why do those destined for greatness feel this attack with such force? Let's explore 5 shocking reasons why the battle with lust is often fiercest for those who are spiritually chosen. Reason 1. Spiritual sensitivity makes temptation stronger. For what reasons do spiritually sensitive people experience stronger temptations? The answer can be found in the essence of spiritual sensitivity. People called to a higher calling, or those chosen by God, are not like everyone else. To a greater extent than the average person, they are spiritually attuned. They have a sixth sense that most people don't have. As important as it is that they are able to perceive God's presence more clearly, they are also acutely aware of the darkness that surrounds them. The paradox of being spiritually attuned is this: what draws them nearer to their divine mission also leaves them vulnerable to more intense attacks. Picture yourself in a room where not a sound can be heard, but a whisper. You can make out every sigh and creak, even when everyone else is blissfully unaware of them. People who are spiritually attuned also have a better grasp of the spiritual world. Not only do they know God's will, but they also know the enemy's sneaky tactics. What kind of weapon does the adversary typically employ? Lust. Lust is not simply a physical urge. For those attuned to spiritual realities, lust becomes a spiritual snare wrapped in physical temptation. It's like a poison hidden inside honey. The spiritually sensitive feel the pull more intensely because their spirit recognizes the battle, even when their flesh feels the temptation. Here's the danger: the enemy knows exactly how spiritually aware individuals operate. He crafts temptations not for the masses, but tailored specifically for them. Think of it like a master trapper setting a snare. The bait isn't random, it's selected carefully. Lust is designed to confuse the spiritually sensitive. Why? Because once the opponent corrupts their attention, he restricts their efficacy. And the attack doesn't always come in obvious ways. Sometimes, it's subtle: an image, a thought, a glance that lingers too long. To the sensitive soul, these small moments aren't so small. They're loud, intrusive, and relentless. The enemy attacks through repetition, not just intensity. A spiritually sensitive person doesn't need a massive temptation. They need just a persistent one, nagging at their mind, breaking down their resolve bit by bit. Why does this work? Because sensitivity to the spirit often comes with vulnerability in the flesh. A person aware of God's presence might still be blind to their emotional and physical weaknesses. The enemy capitalizes on this blind spot. Now, why does lust, specifically, work so effectively? Because lust attacks both the body and the mind simultaneously. It floods the senses, clouds judgment, and weakens resolve. And for those chosen for divine missions, distraction is deadly. If their spiritual focus is corrupted even momentarily, their growth slows, their purpose stalls, and their connection to God is strained. In essence, spiritual sensitivity is both a gift and a battleground. It's like having the sharpest sword but needing constant vigilance to avoid cutting oneself. Yet, understanding this truth is half the battle. Recognizing that heightened spiritual sensitivity means increased vulnerability to temptation empowers chosen individuals to prepare. They can build safeguards, strengthen their spiritual disciplines, and remain aware that what they feel isn't abnormal, it's strategic. The attacks are deliberate. If you are someone who feels overwhelmed by persistent, lustful thoughts, understand this: it's not because you're weak, it's because you're targeted. The enemy doesn't waste resources. He focuses on those who pose a threat to his kingdom. So, next time the battle feels too heavy, remind yourself, your sensitivity is proof of your calling. The intensity of the temptation is evidence of your importance in the spiritual realm, but with God's strength, and through disciplined resistance, you can overcome. Lust may be loud, but God's purpose for you is louder. Reason 2. Isolation leads to hidden battles. Imagine walking a long, narrow path with no one beside you. The silence, the solitude, it can feel peaceful at first, but over time, it can become crushing. This is often the life of someone chosen for a divine purpose. Isolation isn't accidental for them. It's part of their journey. But with that solitude comes an unexpected danger. Hidden battles. Being set apart for greatness means being different. Your thoughts, your values, your goals, they don't align with the majority. And while this spiritual separation is necessary for your growth, it also cuts you off from shared human connection. Others don't understand your struggles because they don't walk your path. And what the enemy loves more than anything is to attack those who fight alone. Isolation breeds secrecy. It creates shadows where sin can thrive unnoticed. And among the most potent of these sins is lust. Why? Because it's personal. It's internal. It's easy to hide. Lust doesn't need an audience. It grows silently, often feeding on the loneliness itself. When you are isolated, your mind becomes your main company. Your ideas loop again and over. Temptation speaks more plainly. When there are no other voices reminding you of your goal, the opponent takes advantage of this. He talks when no one else is around to drown him out. Here, U2019's the real trap. Isolated individuals often U2019T even realize how deep their hidden battles go. They start with small compromises, a thought entertained, a second glance merited, a moment of weakness pardoned. Slowly, those little gaps become massive sores. And because no one else sees, the individual assures themselves, it's U2019S, not that serious. But it is. An isolation ISEN, U2019T, necessarily physical. You might be surrounded by others, yet feel entirely alone in your spiritual struggle. Why? Because no one understands your individual calling, your unique responsibilities. When others can U2019T relate, you stop sharing. You stop confessing. You shrink within. And there, in the solitude of your private existence, lust festers. The Bible is loaded with warnings about fighting alone. Ecclesiastes 4:9-10 tells us, two are better than one. If either of them falls, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. This is especially true in spiritual combat. Accountability, ISNU 2019T. Optional, UALINGISI. It's U2019S survival. Chosen persons, however, typically reject accountability. Their elevated calling makes them feel that revealing weakness will ruin their spiritual authority. The result? They continue carrying their worries in secret, and desire like secrets. It flourishes when their U2019's no light. What U2019's the solution? Recognize that isolation is a strategy of the opponent. God draws his people to community for a reason. Accountability is not a punishment. UALINGISI. It's UALINGIJO's protection. Breaking the silence is the first step toward breaking the pattern. Whether via trustworthy mentors, spiritual companions, or an honest confession to God. Recognizing that you are struggling is not a sign of weakness. True, admitting weakness is a brave move. Lust can't endure the light that comes from coming out of isolation and into connection, which brings the underlying conflict to the surface. If you're battling alone, know that it's not a sign of weakness, but of isolation that makes the war more difficult. Even the opponent is aware of it. Stand up and speak up. Do not remain concealed. Reach out, speak. Try to find a sympathetic ear or someone who can relate. Keep in mind that no one can win an army battle on their own. Reason 3. High calling attracts greater attacks. For what reasons do those who are called to greater things endure more severe persecution? There is a reason for this. For people with important heavenly missions, the stakes are substantially higher in the spiritual world. The more important your objective, the more the opponent will fight to thwart you. That's a simple but harsh fact. Imagine an army general. The enemy side doesn't just randomly attack soldiers with their greatest resources. The general is their immediate target. Why? Reason being, when the commander is taken down, the troops get confused. The spiritual realm is no different. The adversary singles out those who have been selected for positions of leadership, influence, and spiritual influence, and launches targeted attacks against them. Now think about this. How might one most easily derail a leader's spiritual progress? Lust. Public displays of lust aren't necessary for their efficacy. It is effective in the mental recesses of the individual. An individual's spiritual paralysis can occur, even in the absence of a public collapse when devoured by desire. On the inside, they feel shackled by feelings of shame, remorse, and bewilderment. The opposition has a well-planned strategy. He can get you to stop your phoning without actually doing anything. If he wants to slow you down, that's all. Passion zaps one's spiritual vitality, clouds one's vision, and erodes self-assurance. Your divine destiny is being robbed every second that you are entangled in cycles of temptation. Examine past events. Innumerable religious leaders have failed to anticipate this kind of assault. Their public ministry was thriving, but they battled with sin in private. The intensity of the enemy's attacks increased as their platform rose higher. Many eventually perished, not from lack of strength, but from failing to anticipate the enemy's doggedness. If desire is the enemy's weapon of choice, why is that? Why? Because it's an intimate matter. It goes after your soul, your identity, and your thoughts. Lust fights you from the inside out, unlike outside forces. Isolation and a lack of courage to confess are symptoms of the humiliation it fosters. Feeling ashamed makes the enemy's task simpler. Remaining silent breeds concealment. The sinful thrive on secrecy. This goes on indefinitely. Another important fact: the spiritual power of a selected person gradually declines whenever they give in to desire. On the inside, maybe, but not in public. Their trust in prayer is diminished. It shows in their service. Even if they feel like a phony, they minister anyhow. As a result of this spiritual wariness, their efficacy diminishes. The adversary doesn't have to wipe you out in an instant. He plans to gradually and persistently erode you from your mission over time. He uses lust as his weapon of choice. One glimmer of optimism though: knowledge is power. You may change your approach to battle. Once you realize that desire isn't an innocent want, but rather a calculated attempt to derail your heavenly mission, knowing that not only is your purity at stake, but also your whole spiritual effect, allows you to approach your struggle with seriousness. You shouldn't let the fact that your noble vocation makes you more vulnerable to assaults deter you. A summons to spiritual watchfulness. The trials you endure are signs of how valuable you are to God's purpose, and this should serve as a reminder of that. You are not assaulted due of your weakness. The enemy's kingdom views you as a threat, so they attack you, saying, "What's wrong with me?" will just lead to more temptation. You must instead understand that this assault demonstrates your calling. Do not budge. Boost your protections. And battle you must, for the triumph safeguards not just your spirit, but also your heavenly calling. Reason 4. Emotional wounds create open doors. An often overlooked factor contributing to selected people's desire issues is the fact that they're emotional. Scars provide opportunities for spiritual assault. Deep wounds mark those who are destined for greater things. Perhaps it's feelings of rejection from a young age. Maybe it was someone they trusted betraying them. Feelings of inadequacy, abandonment, and grief linger long after the trauma has passed. And the adversary is well aware of how to take advantage of them. Lust doesn't necessarily manifest as overt sexual desire. Frequently, it pretends to be reassuring, a sham remedy for mental anguish. Lust is a comfort for those who are lonely or rejected, an interim haven, an imposter's declaration of closeness that it will heal all wounds. Unhealed wounds develop spiritual weaknesses, and it is a terrible fact. No one can make you feel lustful unless they want to. He patiently awaits the moment when your suffering presents itself as an ideal opening. He provides passion as a bandage the second you're emotionally vulnerable. But it's a bandage that doesn't heal, and instead makes things worse. The loop may be broken down as follows. You feel emotional agony. You want a fast fix rather than face the problem head-on. The pleasure from engaging in lustful thoughts or deeds is short-lived. However, subsequent emotions of shame and guilt will only serve to deepen your sense of worthlessness. Your emotional defenses are already down, and now you're feeling even more ashamed, so the cycle continues. Subtle but deadly. The enemy wants you to run away from suffering and into sin. Not all cases begin with severe trauma. When we let our emotions fester, even tiny wounds can open the door to huge spiritual gaps. A strong term, unfulfilled vows. Season of solitude. Slowly but surely, these moments add up, allowing passion easy access. Their propensity to conceal their suffering is what makes this so perilous for the selected ones. Being perceived as powerful and endowed with spiritual gifts might discourage being vulnerable. Many people feel their spiritual authority would be diminished if they admitted to have emotional issues. Therefore, they choose to remain silent. They numb the anguish inside. The adversary uses the repressed anguish as a playing field. A crucial reality, though, is that unresolved suffering inevitably manifests itself. Sinful coping methods, such as desire, will emerge if it is not healed through genuine connection and God's love. So, how can we fix this? Restoring one's inner health. If you ignore your grief or act strong, you will never recover. Asking oneself, where have I been hurt, is the first step in healing. Where are my scars? The doors will close when you bring your wounds before God. Seek good counsel, and allow trustworthy individuals to be a part of your healing journey. Lust isn't the true antagonist in this situation, and you need to realize that. That's the sign. The real problem is the enemy's ability to take advantage of unresolved anguish. Want diminishes as the healing process progresses. For healing, those who are chosen by God must flee to His presence, not to sin. They ought to talk instead of remaining silent. They need to stop being alone and start interacting. Whatever you hold back from God, He will not be able to cure. However, He provides genuine peace, the type that lust cannot offer once you let Him into those concealed, painful areas. Ask yourself, what am I attempting to soothe? The next time you find yourself entangled in a recurrent struggle with desire, how can I escape this suffering? The initial step in sealing off the entrance that desire continues to use is acknowledging the injury. Your adversary takes advantage of your suffering. God, however, can use your recovery to strengthen you. Reason 5. Strong spiritual gifts come with a weak flesh. Although it may seem contradictory, there is a deep spiritual truth. Those endowed with the most powerful spiritual abilities frequently face the greatest challenges from their own frail human nature. Why? Because at your core, you are still human, regardless of the strength of your calling or the anointing. Yes, the adversary is aware of this. Let's take our time to understand this. Assuming they are immune to certain problems is a common misconception among chosen ones, especially those who possess prophetic vision, profound spiritual discernment, or even authority over others. After all, one would think that lust would be simpler to overcome if they are led by God. Acting in spiritual strength and hearing from God, yes, in principle. The truth is, no. I'll tell you why. Discipline is different from gifts. An offering is made. Building discipline is essential. God has given you a special talent in the spiritual realm. His grace, and not your power, is demonstrated. It uses you as an intermediary, but your willpower is not what keeps it going. You might have a lot of spiritual talent and still lack spiritual discipline. The risk is greatest here. Your generosity is irrelevant to lust. It shows complete disregard for your religious status. Your humanity, your body, is vulnerable until you put in the work to train and discipline yourself. If you don't refresh your thoughts every day, fast regularly, pray intentionally, and meditate on scripture, your flesh will gain power. But where there is dominion of the flesh, desire flourishes. Not even the most powerful man in history in terms of spirituality. The Apostle Paul acknowledged this difficulty in Romans 7:19. I keep doing the evil that I do not want to do, rather than the good that I want to do, the author says. He was admitting that his flesh was still a battleground. Even if he had grown spiritually, the opponent is aware of this. He is aware that the more one's anointing, the greater the impact one's downfall might have on others. Therefore, he avoids dealing with your talents and instead focuses on your lack of self-control. He prefers lust as a tactic. Let that sink in. You have the gift of oratory. When you put your hands on somebody, miraculous things may happen. But you may be fighting shame, desire, and sinful cycles while no one is looking. Why? You give in to your gifts in public, but give in to the temptations of your body in private. The risk arises when a large number of the selected ones equate holiness with giftedness, because they are acting in a spiritually empowered capacity. They reason, their personal lives are secure. However, the reality is rather different. You need to be more careful as God utilizes you more. When it comes to your ministry, your gifts will open doors, but self-discipline is what will keep them open. Subtly, lust strikes. It grows in those who lack self-control. If you put off taking care of your spiritual health, desire will eventually win out. When you're exhausted, it makes a low noise. When you're emotionally spent, it will knock. The lack of spiritual discipline makes resistance more difficult with time. Is there a way to fix this? Seeing your humanity for what it is, a fact, not a defect. Your soul needs constant protection. Having a gift does not give you superhuman power. You must humble yourself to accept this. You can tame the voice of desire only through regular spiritual practices. Praying is required. Skipping meals isn't a choice.